Hi, my name is Damon Lembi, and I'm the CEO of Learn It. I hope you enjoy your class. And if you do, please like and subscribe to my channel because we have plenty of more content coming. Have a good day.
Hello, and welcome to Building a Vision for Your Team at Learn It. My name's Christian Durso, and I'm really excited to bring this course to you. So you probably are thinking about a couple of direct reports you might have or some people that you work with that you just can't quite get through to. How might we set a vision for them so they can show up intrinsically motivated to do the things that we really want them to accomplish? That's a little bit about what we're talking about today. What gets you up at work? What are you afraid of? And also just putting a lantern in their hands so they can find their way. That's what we're doing. So my name's Christian Durso, and I'm a professional development trainer at Learn It. One of my passions in life is really finding creativity in professional lives and also bringing more professionalism to creative lives. It's one of my missions in life, and I'm really excited to bring this course to you today. So just some housekeeping about how this is going to work. This is a self-guided video, so take it at your own pace. There'll be times when I'm going to ask you to go ahead and just stop the video to do an exercise or take a pause before we get to the next chapter. But some housekeeping items up front. These are ones that I usually would have if we were doing this class live, keeping your camera on. Of course, that's mostly for me, but I would urge you to keep a pen and paper nearby so you can take notes. Also, some water, stay hydrated, be curious, lean in. And these exercises that I ask you to do, I really recommend taking the time to actually do them. We're going to dive into thinking about our direct reports, connecting with them, exercises that are going to gear you towards finding those answers. Some of them you might find in the course of this video. Other ones you might find using these tools a little bit later. So how this works, I want to start you off by just thinking about what a vision is and how it can have an impact. And this brings us to, I want to rewind the clock to the early 1960s. And this is in the middle of the space race, right? Think of a time before we were able to go to the moon, before we've put a man or a person on the moon, right? So this is a story about a time when a young president, President Kennedy, in America, was not sure how he was going to get this done, right? There was a lot of opposition. It cost a lot of money. He wasn't sure yet if this message of sending a person to the moon had actually connected with the American people. And that all changed one night when he was touring the halls of NASA, and there was a janitor who was still there, still sweeping the floors. And President Kennedy went up to this janitor and said, "What are you still doing here?" And he said, "Well, Mr. President, I am helping to put a man on the moon." And that is the moment when Kennedy knew, you know what? This actual mission is connecting with people. Because if the janitor knew that his job of sweeping the floors was actually integral to the mission of putting someone on the moon, now we were connecting to a larger purpose. He knew that the vision was actually connecting with people. And this is what we want. Whether or not someone's job is actually connected with the last part of our mission, we want them to feel as though they are all part of it. And we want to be able to use language that connects directly with them. And that's what we're doing here. And just some statistics about why vision matters and why we should even pay attention to it. I want you to take a look at that statistic right in the middle there, that 23%. People are willing to sacrifice up to 23% of their future earnings just if they can have meaningful work. What this means is that people are willing to take a bit of a pay cut if it means that they can actually be intrinsically motivated by the thing they're doing. And you could probably think of your personal life. Think about people in your life that you might know who work at a job and maybe they're not getting paid enough, but they're staying there because they like what they do or they like the people they work with. You might also think of people who have left jobs that paid them really well because they just didn't connect to the work. Well, what we want to do is try our best to see if we can find what intrinsically motivates our direct reports and connect it to the values we want them to uphold and the accomplishments we want them to come into in their roles at where they already work. This way we can maintain our retention levels and we can also build morale while we do it. And this is going to require us to get a little bit creative with our work today. And if you're thinking to yourself, well, hey, I'm not very creative. I'm not a creative person. Maybe I'm just someone who runs a business, or I'm someone who runs a team. Creativity belongs to someone else. I want you to think about this. And this comes from someone who was highly intelligent. Creativity is just your intelligence having a little bit of fun. And that is really it. And so the agenda for today, this is what we're looking at. We're going to talk about setting a direction, about who we're setting a direction for. Is it our direct reports? Are we doing it for our team? Right? We're also going to talk about why it matters, why creating a vision actually matters. And we're going to put that into play, practice a vision creating process that we can replicate on our own time. So this is what we're looking at today. This is the introduction. Go ahead and pause this video, take a couple minutes, and get prepared with your notebook, with a pencil or a pen. Get your water, and let's go through this. We're going to start with purpose-driven work. Great. So now you're with me. Let's talk about where we're aiming. What is our target? What do we mean by vision? And who exactly are we creating this vision for? So let's talk about ways we can set visions. So of course, there are things like mission statements and vision statements. We're going to talk a little about what those look like. There's also analogies where we make comparisons between things. There's also narratives. What that is a story. Now, we've been telling stories since the dawn of time. Stories have a particular hook in our minds. And if we can come up with a really good story, kind of like the space race story, we might be able to land into our direct report's mind in a way that can really help motivate them. So these are a few areas to look at. But first, let's take a look at a test. So this is a guess who test that we won't grade this one. And I urge you to not cheat, to not go to a search engine to find the answers to these. Take a look at these mission statements, these vision statements, and try to decide which one belongs to which company. I promise you it's highly likely that you're familiar with one of these companies. A, B, C, D, E, and F. Take a moment, pause the video, and see if you can come up with which company belongs to which statement. Okay, so hopefully you paused the video for a few minutes here. Were you able to find out which one belonged to which company, and did you not cheat? So let's start with A, to provide access to the world's information in just one click. That one, of course, belongs to Google. Maybe you got that. Let's move on to B, to make people happy. Well, that one belongs to Disney. Interesting, isn't it? Their vision isn't we make the best movies or we have the best theme parks, right? Their mission in all the things they do is to make people happy. This is incredibly useful for their team. People who show up on a day-to-day basis that might not always feel like what they do at their job is making people happy. If they can feel connected to that larger vision, it might drive some intrinsic motivation, right? What I do here when I show up is I'm a part of a mission to land someone on the moon. I am a part of a mission to make people happy. This thing really does speak to people. Capture, share the world's moments, Instagram. Spread ideas, that's TED Talks, right? I show up to work. Everything I do is about spreading good ideas to help people throughout the world realize their full potential. Who doesn't want to be connected to that vision? That one belongs to Microsoft. Inspiring creativity and enriching life. That one belongs to ByteDance. Think about the creative videos people are making and the new ways we have of communicating. Everything people do when they show up to work is about inspiring creativity and enriching life. This is where we want to go. So let's talk about the things that we're not actually going to be focused on today. There are other kinds of courses, there are other kinds of disciplines that will be dedicated toward creating a vision statement or simply creating a mission statement or creating value statements, right? These are the pillars in which we exist, or the principles, right? These are good and these are useful, but this is not where we're going today. Where we're heading is going after purpose. How do we connect the people we work with to purpose? That's what we're doing today. So let's start with an analogy. Take a moment and read the one that you see on the screen. It's an interesting way to describe a scuba diver, right? So if someone's job were to be a scuba diver, here we might make an analogy. It's part superhero, you're breathing underwater. You're part submarine. Part of you is actually like this big thing that can go underwater and go on these missions and adventures. Partially, you also get to explore other worlds. These are analogies that we're using so that we can actually connect with what a scuba diver could potentially be. Now you might say, okay, well, that's easy to do with a scuba diver because it's kind of an exciting job. Well, maybe, but there might be other ways we can connect what we're doing to being a superhero, what we're doing to exploring something different. Just consider what that might be. Now let's look at a story. I'll give you a moment to read this slide. Now, of course, David Foster Wallace is quite a genius here. But what the story is pointing toward is a story about sometimes, especially when you're young, you don't even realize the water in which you're swimming. You don't realize that you're even inside of water. It's only older people, veterans, who might understand that. This is an example of a narrative which points to a big idea. How can we come up with something like this? And so, who are we creating the vision for? We talked about those mission statements. We talked about analogies. We talked about narratives. Who are we creating it for? We can go all the way up to the organizational level. What is the vision for our organization? We can talk about the specific area, which different area of our business, also the different teams within those areas, and all the way down to the IC level, the individual contributors. A good place for us to start is at the individual contributor level. You also might think of these folks as your direct reports, right? So here's what I want us to do for the first exercise. I want you to think of a direct report that you might have. Who can you choose? Choose someone that you know well enough. They're not brand new, so you don't know them yet, right? You've never met them. Maybe they're just on the team for a few weeks or a few months. Someone that you know fairly well, and also someone that you haven't quite gotten through to yet. This might be a good person to work with. Think about them. Now think about a few questions to answer. What is their role? What are they like? What do you think motivates them? And really dive deep into each of these. I want to give you about 5 to 10 minutes on your own to pause this video and to really think about these questions. What are they like? What is their general mood? What is their attitude like? Do they seem to be an introvert? Do they seem to be an extrovert? What's their personality type, if you happen to know a little bit about personality types? Do they move fast? Do they move slow? Right? Do they seem to be really hot? Do they seem to be really cool? Right? When it comes to their motivators, have they said anything about things that interest them? Do they appreciate family? Do they have hobbies? Right? Do they have pets? What part of town do they live in? Have they mentioned anything about things that interest them outside of work? These are the things that you might want to consider. Not everyone's going to be motivated by the things that you're motivated by. And not everyone is always motivated by a raise at work right away, at least not intrinsically. And what we're after is that intrinsic purpose. So I want you to go ahead and take about 10 minutes right now. Pause the video and do a deep dive into each of these questions. Everything you think you might know about this direct report, write it down. And try to refrain from judgment. If you have some judgments about who you think this person is, leave those to the side for now. They may come in handy later. But really try to say, what do I know about them? And if you're coming up short, maybe think of things you could ask further. I need to find out more. Maybe I can know a little bit more about this. This gives you a place to go for the research element, which we're going to get to a little bit later. So go ahead and take 10 minutes, get your pen and paper, really take a deep dive into these questions about your individual contributor. So now you've taken some time to think about that direct report. We're going to dive deeper into those things that you just answered. Hopefully you now have in front of you a list of things, or at least a list of questions that you need to know a little bit more about to keep going, to find how to talk to, how to get through to, how to connect this person to purpose with the things you hope for them to do. I want to introduce the design thinking process. We're going to follow the design thinking process in creating our vision for our direct reports for our individual contributors. Here's an overview of how this works. There's a lot of steps that design thinking takes to create innovative products. Now, this is often used in product development. This is also used more and more now in process development. The first couple stages here are empathizing with our users, empathizing with the person that we're going to talk to, and really truly understanding where they're coming from, how they got here. And then after that, we move into defining what the issues might be. And once we're there, we might find something a little surprising, something we hadn't thought of before. And when we come up with that thing that we hadn't thought of before, now we begin ideating on all different ways we can approach that question. And after that, they move to prototyping, coming up with solutions on the fly. Would this work? Would that work? In product development, this often means putting something together with duct tape and glue and cardboard and saying, this is what I think the product might look like, a minimum viable product. And then moving on to testing it. Would it work in this situation? Would it not work in that situation? And going back to the empathize and define and going through this process. And finally, the last one we add on is measurement. Now that works all good and well for product development. We're going to modify it for process development. How can we empathize with our direct report, with our individual contributor? We've already started doing that. When we come up with things that might feel a little surprising, we might move into defining what are the things that do motivate them, given all the things I've just now understood. Now, in this empathize phase, these first two places, this is where we're going to spend the first bit of our time today, in empathize and define. Classically, in design thinking, this means research. This often means interviewing, and this means interviewing using non-leading questions. For our purposes today, and I want to be very clear about this, I'm not advocating an interview approach. Now, if there are things that you still need to learn about from your individual contributor or your direct report, it might be nice to ask them a couple questions. But as we work through today, a lot of this is going to be about personal brainstorming about what we do know about them and about what might work with them based on what we know. So this is how that process works. We're coming up with solutions, and we're also taking the proposed problems not for granted. The classic example in design thinking goes a little bit like this. So there was a truck that was driving down the street, and it was going into town, and there was a bridge that was on the entrance to the town. And as the truck went underneath the bridge, the truck driver miscalculated the height of the truck, and the truck got stuck below the bridge. And it backed up traffic for miles in both directions. And everyone came out to look at this problem with this big truck stuck underneath this bridge. And no one quite knew what to do. Everyone had a competing idea about what the problem might be, how to solve it. Anyone who had a really good engineering background would talk about, ooh, we can dismantle part of the bridge here. Anyone with a really good automotive background would say, oh, I know how we can take off part of the roof. I know these trucks, we can take off part of the roof doing this. And it took a kid riding by on his bicycle to take a look at the problem and say, why don't you just let the air out of the tires? Now, this happens a lot, right? We take our own expertise, we take what we think we know about a problem, and we apply it immediately, and we come up with solutions. It really takes an outside the box angle, a creative look to say there might be something different. The problem is not the roof and the bridge. The problem really can be solved with the air and the tires. So we want to go through this whole process thinking, where is the air in the tires that I am not yet seeing? That's what we're doing. And so this does mean empathize, right? We've started doing that just a little bit, and we're going to continue doing it. You probably have heard of this word empathy before, right? This comes from the Latin, em meaning in, pathos meaning feeling. So being in feeling with someone. It's different from sympathizing with someone, where you have a bit of a distance in sympathy and say, oh, look at them over there, poor you. Empathize means, oh, I understand what this is to be in their shoes, right? And this is what we have to do. In classic product development, if you were creating a new grocery cart, as an example, you might go out and actually use the grocery cart and shop in the shopping mall or grocery store to see how that cart works, and you would empathize with the user. Well, you might want to do that with your direct report too, right? Where do they live? What is their commute like? Do they have any photos on their desk? What is their background? Who is in those photos? What might their day-to-day be like? What inspires them, right? This is all that research part. And if you don't know these elements, you might not know enough about them to understand what is going to give them purpose and drive, right? What do they enjoy doing outside of work? What are they proud of? Those first few moments in a meeting with someone, right, where you have an icebreaker and you say, hey, how was your weekend? How did things go? Anything going on? This is the best time to gather that information. Oh, they spent time with their family. Oh, they spent time with a pet. Oh, they did this hobby or this. They understand a little bit about what makes them tick, what they really, really like. And when you know that, now you understand their language a little bit. So what I want you to do is I want you to take another 5 to 10 minutes, and I want you to pause the video, and I want you to go deeper into those questions you were just coming up with last time. Is there anything more you need to know? What else could be useful? Have I considered about what they're like? Have I considered about their family? Have I considered anything else about their interests? If not, let me make a list of questions I might want to ask the next time I'm meeting with them one-to-one to know a little bit more about what makes them tick. I'm going to give you 5 to 10 minutes to do that right now. Take your time. When we come back, we'll talk about the next step, which is defining. So now you've gone even deeper with your empathizing of your individual contributor. Really thinking through what might make them tick. We often skip this part because we immediately want to go to solutions, or we immediately want to go to demands. And in some instances, we have to do it because time is of the essence. But if what we're really after is helping someone find purpose so that they can work harder, work better, want to show up, be intrinsically motivated to do those things, we don't want to skip this step. Figuring out what makes them tick so we can reach them on their level so they will come back to us with things that we need for us all to celebrate success. So now we've done some empathizing. Now, we haven't come up with the answers yet, right? And I want to urge that too. As you've done the empathy, there's probably some times when you've thought, oh, I figured it out. I know what the answer is. Hold on, right? Hold on. There's a whole process we still have to go through. Set that aside. Maybe that's a nice time for ideation a little bit later. But we just want to go through the empathizing, understanding what all this raw data is. Now we're going to move into the define part. There's something called the 5 whys. It's a tool I want to introduce here. Maybe you've heard of it. Maybe you haven't. If you haven't, hopefully this is useful. If you have, I'm really hoping this is a great refresher. This 5 whys was made famous by Sakichi Toyoda, and he used it as a tool to really understand what was going on the shop floor. Someone would bring him a problem or an issue, and he would say, well, why is that happening? And then they would sort of say, okay, well, it's because of this. And he would say a second time, well, why is that happening? And they would say, well, it's because of this. And a third time, he would say, well, why is that? He would get all the way to 5 whys. And he said by the time he reached that 5th why, generally he was after a root cause to an issue. And that root cause was where he wanted to focus his resources and his attentions, right? Otherwise, it's like the metaphor of swatting flies instead of just taking out the garbage. So what we're going to do here is we're going to utilize this tool. And I want to be very clear here. I am not advocating an interview tool with your direct report. Sometimes this can be misconstrued. when you introduce the 5 whys, especially in the context of understanding a direct report. And you'll walk away saying, well, I guess I'm supposed to ask them why 5 times. Boy, that seems really like an interrogation. That's not what I'm asking you to do. What I'm asking you to do is to really come up with what the problem is and to ask yourself to brainstorm, why might that be? Why might that be? And to not stop until you come up with something. What are we looking for? Well, we're looking for the story, right? The beginning of the story. This is the thing that is going to connect us to the thing we're going to use to make a purpose or drive a vision statement. And it's going to be something that's a little bit surprising, something that we hadn't seen before. It's going to be something that we say, oh, you know what? I had never connected that before, but now that I'm really kind of getting to the root of things, I'm maybe now finding that this is actually the thing that most drives them. So we're looking for that surprise. I'll give you an example of how the surprise can come out and really, really change how we go about things. And this is about a company in Detroit it was a real estate company. And what they were doing was they were trying to sell new units to downsizers. These were retirees who were looking forward to maybe selling their home, maybe keeping some of that income and moving into smaller units where they could downsize. And they did all the research, they did all the right advertising, they found the right spots, and they were ready to sell all of these new units to a population they knew was hungry to do such a thing. And they didn't sell very well. They only sold a few units in this otherwise great building. They couldn't figure out why or how they'd gone wrong. And so they did the normal thing that everyone would do, and is a mistake, is they began asking people, well, what do you want? What would make you want to buy the unit? And they ran the focus groups and the surveys, and what they came up with at the end of that miserable task was bay windows. So they went through and said, okay, well, we need to get bay windows in here because that's what they said they want. And so they went through and spent a lot of money making bay windows, and they put them on sale again, and no one bought it. And they couldn't figure it out. So they decided to go through a design thinking process, and they empathized with the people who had already bought the units. And they said, can you walk me through the story of how you got here? How did you come up with the ability to buy this place? What was your story? And they just listened. And as they did enough of those, they found something surprising that was common in all of the stories of the people who bought and the people who didn't. It was the dining room table. The dining room table. Surprising, right? Now, again, we still don't have the solution. What about it? Everyone said in their surveys and as they talk about their stories, once I figured out what to do with the dining room table, then I was ready to move. And the people who didn't move in said the exact opposite. They said, I didn't know what to do with the dining room table, so I decided I'm not going to move. I'm just going to stay put. The dining room table was the thing that was keeping people from moving into a unit they were otherwise hungry to get. Now at this point, there's something interesting that had come up. They found that root cause, those 5 whys. It wasn't about bay windows all along. It wasn't about advertising. It was about a dining room table. So then they decided, okay, well, what can we do now to accommodate this dining room table? They ideated on all kinds of new solutions. And what they came up with was, hey, let's figure out how to get people storage units where they can store their furniture for a little bit longer. And we'll include that in the price of the unit. Hey, let's help them out with storage trucks. You know what? Maybe in the building, we can give them a room where they can leave their extra furniture for a couple months while they sort out what to do with it. And as they added on these add-ons, they were able to pass the price on to the consumer to pay for those things, and then they began selling. The problem wasn't the bay window. The problem wasn't the advertising. The problem was they hadn't connected to people on a human level on what they were really dealing with. What do I do with the dining room table? Once I figure that out, I'm ready to maybe figure out how to downsize. That dining room table represents family. It represents where we've had meals. It also is a very big piece of furniture that you put some time and thought and life into. People weren't ready to separate with that. That was the surprise. So as we're thinking about our direct reports, I want you to look for that dining room table. What is the thing that you're not thinking about? Look for the air in the tires. What's that thing that you're not quite connecting to yet? That's the thing that's going to move the needle, not the thing that you just came up with. Okay, I guess that's it. Maybe I'll try that, right? Keep asking yourself these questions. Go through those 5 whys. And so what I want you to do now is to take this time to do that. Take 10 minutes. Go back over this list of things where you're coming up with ways to empathize with your direct report, empathize with your individual contributor, and ask yourself these questions, right? What are they missing here? What are the issues I'm really having with them? Ask yourself that. When you come up with that, ask, well, why? Why? And if you're unsure of where to start, you might start just simply, what does this person like most about work? What do they like least about work? Ask yourself those, and you might come up with a solution. As you dive through, you might get to the 5th why and realize, this person is actually an artist, or this person really values the outdoors with their family. Those 2 things might give you something to say, okay, how can I maybe connect those things? We're not making solutions yet. We're just looking for that thing that we maybe haven't thought of yet. So take this time, 10 minutes, really go over those things that you come up with, the empathy questions and the things that you were thinking about, putting yourself in their shoes, and come up with that question of why aren't they getting their work done? Why aren't they showing up right? Why are they actually having issues in this domain? What do they like most about work? What do they like least about work? Then ask why. See if you can come up with something. Challenge yourself. It's not easy. I'm going to give you 10 minutes, and when you do, rejoin us. Welcome back. So, you've gone to the 5 whys. I'm hoping that now at that 5th why, if you need to go to some further whys, maybe a 6th or 7th if you needed to, I'm hoping you're finding something surprising or different or interesting. Or at the very least, I'm hoping you're seeing where your blind spots might be, areas where you might want to find out just a little bit more. But if you found something that's somewhat surprising, like that dining room table or like the air in the tires, you might be on the road to a solution. Now, again, we're not coming up with the solution just yet. So you're finding what matters to your direct report. And now you're turning your attention to say, how do I then connect this with my direct report? And this is what's leading us to story. How do we come up with an interesting story? And I'll give you an example here. You see a race car on the slide here. Well, this comes from someone who worked in cybersecurity, and they had to use story to connect with their clients as to why they might want to invest in cybersecurity. And what they came up with was the analogy and the story of brakes on a race car. And they said, cybersecurity is like brakes on a race car. What does that mean? We are not here to slow you down. We're actually here so that you can go as fast as you possibly can. We're there to assist on the times when you need to make those hard turns. And if you can go as fast as you possibly can, you can only because you know you have brakes there to save you if you need them. This was helpful for people to realize, okay, maybe we do need to invest in something that is going to take a lot of resources, and it might add a little bit of stoppage here and there, but it's going to allow us to do our most. This was a story that connected to clients. That's what we're doing here. We're looking for what that story might be. And we're also looking through metaphor. This way the cybersecurity spokesperson used brakes on a race car as the metaphor. So here's what we're doing. We're ideating, coming up with things. The cybersecurity expert could have come up with a lot of other things before they got to the brakes on the race car, right? And putting everything down. How might we relate that thing we found with the 5 whys with the thing that I need to connect them to, right? Ideating. This means going through all kinds of ideas, brainstorming, and then the prototyping phase is going through and selecting the ones that might be the best ones. We'll get to the testing in a minute, but this is where we want to live for when it comes to story and metaphor. And what is metaphorical thinking, right? It's taking 2 unrelated things and then putting it together to find what it is they have in common. This is cybersecurity brakes on a race car. They are unrelated. The metaphorical thinking found the thing they shared, and that is what made the difference. So we might, as we found that thing at the bottom of that 5 whys, the thing that might really speak to them, or the thing that they really might be curious about or interested in, that might be A, right? We might need to find B so we can solve for the thing in the middle, which is the thing we want them to do, right? The thing we want to connect them to, the purpose. So we need to do a little bit of thinking around what those things are. Here's some examples of metaphors, right? Life is like a box of chocolates. You probably have heard of that movie, or at least where that line comes from, right? So it takes life and chocolates. The thing they have in common is you never know what you're going to get, right? Another one is shoes are like gloves for the feet, right? So we have shoes. The thing that's not in common with shoes is gloves, and they're gloves for the feet. That's the thing that brings them together. The other thing is an analogy that actually Arnold Schwarzenegger used about electric cars. He was trying to get California to understand why we needed to invest in cleaner energy. And the way he described it was, he said, if you took 2 cars and you put them in 2 different garages, one of those cars is electric, one of those cars is gas powered, and you left them on for an hour, which garage would you like to go into? That's what we're doing to our planet. So he was using the analogy of a car and a garage as a starting place for what we're doing to our atmosphere. So these are examples of ways that really connect so that people can understand something. And we can do it through a quick metaphor. We can do it through an analogy in a story. We could also do it through something very, very simple. And so the way this is going to work is what I want you to do, just as an exercise here, is I want you to write down your values. That's right, your values, the ones that you work with at work or in your personal life, right? These things could be things like my value is creativity. My value is mentorship. My value is punctuality, right? What are your values? I want to give you about 2 minutes, not a lot of time. Pause the video and come up with 3 or 4 of those values. I promise you this is going somewhere, but I want to make sure you invest this time right now. What are some values you hold? So now you have a few values that you hold in front of you. Now, the second thing I want you to do is going to be something totally different. What I want you to do is I want you to scan your environment where you currently are. You might be in an office. You might be at home. You might be at your dining room table. What I want you to do is I want you to look around that room and find several objects. I want you to come up with at least 5 objects that you can see. This could be a window. This could be a phone. This could be a journal. This could be a pen. This could be a mouse pad. Look around and find something. It could be a Carmex tin. It could be a water bottle. I want you to just take about 1.5 minutes and come up with 5 things that you see. So go ahead and pause the video just for a few minutes. And next to those values, write down 5 random things that happen to be in your visual field right now. Go ahead and pause the video. Welcome back. Now what I want you to do is I want you to try to take one of your values and I want you to relate it to one of those random objects. And I want you to tell us why those 2 things are like, why they are alike. As an example, I said that one of my values was mentorship. And I said one of the things that I saw in my visual field was a Carmex tin, right? So I'm going to tell you why mentorship is like Carmex. And I promise you, I've actually never done this before. Just to show that it can be done, that it's stretching our metaphorical thinking, that we're trying things out. This is that ideating, prototyping phase. Does this work? Is there a better way to do it, right? So mentorship in Carmex. It is now my task to do something I've never done before and tell you why the value of mentorship is just like Carmex. Okay, this is not easy, but I'm doing it. Mentorship is like Carmex because lips, when they're dry, when they're chapped, they are our articulators. They voice the things that are inside our heads. And if those are chapped and they're not working right, they could cut, they could bleed, they could maybe prevent us from really saying the things that are on our mind. So Carmex is like mentorship. It comes in and it smooths over those parts that need just a little bit of work so that the person can actually reach their full potential and reach the things that they really want to do. And that is how Carmex is like mentorship. So maybe I just made a commercial for Carmex. Maybe I didn't fully succeed in this. Maybe I totally failed. The point isn't to get it right or to come up with something brand new. The point is to engage in metaphorical thinking. So you're trying things out. The values you hold, pick one of them and look at that random list of objects and spend a few minutes. I'm going to go ahead and ask you to pause the video for about 5 minutes. See if you can do it for 2 of your values. Find 1 or 2 of your values and relate it to one of those random objects that you came up with and write down how they are alike. Just the same exercise I did with Carmex. You might be imperfect. It might not even fully work, or it might be something that is hugely moves the needle. So go ahead and engage in this exercise, engage in metaphorical thinking. And this is the kind of thing we're going to be doing when we think about that motivator that we came up with. How is that like the thing that I need them to do? That thing in the middle might be the space where you might be able to motivate them. So go ahead and engage in this metaphorical thinking. Come up with those on your own. Take about 5 minutes. Welcome back. We're moving more now into ideating and prototyping for the task at hand. You just spent a little bit of time using metaphorical thinking with random objects and relating them to your values. That may have been a little crazy and maybe it didn't work. I'm hoping it was a little funny and a little bit of a good exercise for you to just prove to yourself that you can actually do it, that you don't need to stop at that first solution that you come up with, that there are other things behind that. It takes a little bit of push, a little bit of challenge, and you just did it heroically. So now let's talk about how we're going to do it for the task at hand. I want to talk a little bit about intuitive thinking. Right? This is that kind of thinking that comes from that, not just gut feeling, but from an expert feeling that you might have. You've been here before. It's also, there's something called strategic intuition. This is something that comes as a flash of inspired insight. This often happens while you're cooking, right? You're cooking and you're doing something that is totally unrelated to work and suddenly a good idea hits you. Right? Or this might come while you're hiking in nature, right? You're sort of divorced from the other things in your life. The email is off. You don't even have cell service. And suddenly a really good idea hits you for what you need to do. We need to lay the tarmac for these ideas to show up in our life. And of course, there's the shower, right? You're in the shower. You're wearing nothing. You're completely away from all your technical objects. This nice warm water is hitting you. That's where a good idea comes up. One way that this has worked in the past historically is you could think of Archimedes, who was tasked with coming up with how to solve density for how to figure out how to find how much gold was in a certain object, how to map the density of something. He was working on this problem for a long time at his table and staying up all night. And his wife was just sick of him because he was driving her nuts. And she said, "I'm sick of all of this. You're working yourself crazy. You're driving me crazy. Go upstairs and take a bath." And so he goes, "All right, fine. I'll go upstairs and take a bath." And he goes upstairs and he runs the bath and he's just stepping away from his time. And he gets in the bath. And as he does, he watches the water level rise. That's density. He cries out, "Eureka!" And all of a sudden, that's how we get this eureka moment. This is a flash of inspired insight, and it usually comes after we've spent a lot of time working on something. So when you want really good ideas to come of how to connect things, take a time to lay the tarmac for a really good idea to land, right? So this is intuitive thinking. And so where we're heading now is doing exactly what we did with the metaphorical thinking, but now we're turning our angle away from our values and the random objects at hand and back to the end of that 5 whys. What did we come up with? Did you find something that was surprising? Did you find something that's like that dining room table? And now I want you to say, okay, how might I connect this? What are some things I can do? Let me come up with a brainstorm of ideas. Which ones of these ideas might be the best ones to do? Go ahead and take 10 minutes right now and really focus on what you came up with at the end of that 5 whys, that empathy portion, and then relate it to brainstorming. What are things that I could connect to? What are some metaphors I could come up with? Even if they're as stupid and crazy as CarMax is like mentorship, right? Come up with something, try them. Not all of them are going to be good. Move to that prototype in the last 5 minutes or so and say, these are maybe the 2 or 3 I can work with. Take your time now. Take about 10 minutes. Go through this exercise again. So great. Now you've found maybe what the bottom of that 5 whys is. Maybe you have a list of ways you might be able to connect that. And maybe in that prototype phase, you've picked out a few that might be the best ones. Now we begin asking ourselves, okay, how are we going to test this out? With whom are we going to test this out? Well, you might want to come up with a list of colleagues or mentors or people that you work with closely that you might be able to run this by. I'm having trouble getting through to this individual contributor, to my direct report. These are a few things I'm thinking about. What are you thinking about that? How would this land on you? You can begin putting this to other people and asking how this would come across. You might also pick out times when you can begin using this kind of language or using this kind of vision with this person, engaging their response, getting some feedback from them between the lines. Is this working? Did they seem curious about it? Did they seem like they liked talking about it? Did they light up when I was expressing an interest in talking about things in a certain way? Did it work? Or did they feel a heavy hand at play? Is there a way I might need to lighten it up? So it might be a good idea right now to go ahead and take 5 minutes and pause the video right now to think of who might I be able to try this out with as sort of a testing phase, right? This could be a colleague, this could be a mentor, someone you work with. How can I maybe go over this with them as kind of a proofreading? Here's what I've come up with based on what I know. Do you think this might work? Is there anything else you might be able to give me? Also in this testing phase, come up with a list of times you might be able to talk to this person. How might I be able to do this? When would be a good time? And also, what would be the signs that I would know that the initial launch of this new process was working? Do I want to look for some light in their eyes? Do I want to look for some feedback immediately from them? What am I looking for to see if this landed, right? So to come up with those now, I want you to spend about 5 minutes coming up with them now, getting a list of those things. Who can I talk to about this to test it out before I go live with it? And when I go live with it, what are some of the immediate responses I'm going to be looking for to see if it's working? We're going to talk about measurement next, which is more of a long-term test, but immediate, is this working? Did I see something land? Did I see a spark? We're looking for the immediate testing right now. Take 5 minutes and come up with those things right now. So there's the testing phase, which really does require us to reach out to other people to see if they're interested, to see if it's getting through to them as well. And also the testing with our actual direct report. Did something land? Now I need to think longer term, which can be difficult, right? We're busy people. We spend a lot of resources and time doing everything, including this course and including coming up with visions for our direct reports. We need to know that it actually had some kind of impact. Is it working on a long term? And if not, do we need to adjust what we're doing? Do we need to have a different kind of conversation, right? The issue is, and this happens with all of professional development, so much of what we talk about is qualitative. How can we take those qualitative attributes and make them quantitative? Can we turn something that is inherently qualitative into something that actually has data, right? And it's going to be different for every single person, but some examples of how we might be able to measure: is this working? Am I getting through to them? How do I measure their engagement? It might look like this. Are they taking less sick leave? You can ask on surveys, what's your level of engagement? How are you feeling? What's your morale like? You might also be able to measure, are they creating initiatives, right? Are they going out of their way to do a little bit more? What other ways might we be able to measure progress? Are they progressing within the company? That's a bit more of a longer term. We can also test their tone of voice. What's their tone of voice like, if that happens to be applicable, right? Are they speaking up more? Are they contributing more in presentations? How much more? Can we track that data? And as you track that data, especially if you can have a hard number, this can be very, very good when you speak to them later, right? In reviews or reviews with other people when you have to talk about your team. Well, based on this data, here's what I've seen. I'm seeing some progress, and I want to try this again, and maybe go back to the drawing board, back to the ideating, and see if we can do something different to see if we can increase that progress, right? So this data can be really, really useful, because otherwise we just do this and we have no way to test if the impact is actually there. So what I want you to do right now is to take some of those ideas we were just coming up with. Sick leave. Are they actually engaging more in the meetings? Are they speaking up? Are they participating? Are they making new initiatives? Are they going out of their way to do a little bit more? This might show that the vision that I'm working with is actually working. And if those things are not coming up, maybe I need to go back to the drawing board and go back to that ideate list and prototype list. Maybe I need to even go back to the empathize. Am I missing the dining room table piece, right? So come up with what those measurements will be for you so that you know whether or not it's working after a certain amount of time. Right? So we already talked about the test. We knew immediately if I get the light in their eyes, if I get that tone of the voice, if I see them lean forward with interest, I know something is working. Now let's see, a week out, 2 weeks, a month, a year. What are the benchmarks that I need to see to know whether or not something is happening, whether there's actual measurable movement? So take about 5 minutes and come up with what those are for you. Welcome back. So now we're going to put it all together and do it all in one piece. It's really important that you have a strong grasp on each of these pieces. And also important to remember that different organizational levels need different visions, so that you're going to want to do this process again when you do it for your entire team. If you're going to do it for your entire business area, you're going to want to do it again. How do you empathize with a group of people? It's going to be a little different than how do you empathize with just one person, right? This means taking each of the individual needs and taking them on as a whole. How can I speak to the whole group? We're spending most of our time today on just that individual contributor, but we can also think of how we can expand this as well. And if you're having trouble thinking of what might speak to a lot of people, or what might speak even to this one individual contributor, there are some other ways we can think about how people can be driven toward purpose. And they might look like this. Is someone interested in mastery, right? Really getting really good at something. That's a motivator. And if you can know that about someone, you might be able to say, hey, there are ways we can become masters at this, right? Is someone really driven by learning new things? Might we be able to guide them in a direction where they can be in a position to learn new things, right? Tapping into the thing that they really want to do. Novelty. You might have someone who's really adventurous. You might have learned that through asking the 5 whys. They really like adventure, right? They might be drawn to new things. How can we talk to them? How can we vision to them that some things can be new here? Some people are driven by esteem or colleagues. Does this person really like other people? They like connecting with people. They're a people person. How can we connect with them on that? Are there ways we might be able to guide their potential toward that? Some people really like a familial sense, a sense of belonging or even safety. So these are some extra ideas to put into your knapsack on how we might be able to speak to someone. What are they interested in? It might be some of these things. So as a review of where we've been, because we're going to put it all together, we're starting at that empathy phase, right? Where we really want to get in their shoes, not to come up with solutions, but to come up with things that we aren't thinking of at this moment, things that are beyond us right now because we haven't done the work of the research yet. What is life like for them? Really empathizing. Once we get all that data, the dining room table might be floating around in there somewhere. We haven't quite seen it yet. The define. This is where we take all that work and we begin asking questions. Well, what are the issues, right? And why are those the issues? And this is where we can ask, what do they like most about work? What do they like least about work? Those are two basic places to start and to ask, well, why is that? Well, why is that? Well, why is that? Here's where we come up with, this might be the thing, right? We haven't come up with the solution. We still don't know how to use it yet, but we've come up with maybe the thing that feels a little surprising. We move into the ideate. This is where we brainstorm how to put two things together. We prototype them. Which ones might work the best out of those brainstorms? And here's where we go into testing. I have these few ideas. I want to check with some colleagues, and I know when would be a good time to test it on the actual person to see what the initial response feedback might be between the lines. And finally, the measurement. How do I make sure this is having a long-term impact? If anything is failing in that testing and measuring phase, I might want to go back to that define phase. Is there something I'm missing? Is there something more I need to know? And so this is leading us to the final exercise, and I want you to take another 10 to 20 minutes on your own for this. What I want you to do is just to put it all together again. I want you to go back. Is there something you missed in that first part? Now that you see where it's all going, could you have gone deeper on that empathy area? Is there more things you need to learn even? And also, where might we go for the define phase, right? Did I miss something on the whys? Make yourself do it again. Challenge yourself to go further. Pretend you don't have the answer. You might not, but still pretend like you don't. And even if you think you do, you still might not. So continue to go further. Go into this exercise, especially those first two areas, as if you don't have that answer. Go back to that ideate. Are there other ways to put those metaphors together? Challenge yourself in that metaphorical thinking. Make Carmex feel like mentorship. Then go into the prototype, which ones might be the best. And then if you happen to be with a team right now or with someone else, bounce these ideas off of them, present it to them. How might this work? Move into that testing and prototyping. Here it is. Here it all is together. We're going to put this together, and I want you to take 20 minutes now to do just that on your own so that you have all the tools and you're going to go through it all at once. And on your own, when you do this later outside of this course, you might take more than just 20 minutes. You might take a full day to do this. This is good, serious work. We need that time like Archimedes to be in that bath, to let it go and find it rising. And that only comes after we've done a lot of work. But I want you to put it all together now so that you have it all as one big package. 20 minutes on your own. And when you come back, we'll wrap it up. I want to leave you with this. Our job is not to give the purpose. The purpose is already there. It's to help them find it with the work. In order to do that, we really do need to know them. We really need to speak to them like humans and find what their intrinsic motivator is. It's there. We just need to find creative ways to connect it to the work at hand so that we can all celebrate success. So here's some key takeaways from today, right? These visions are the things that connect people to their purpose. We want to find them, right? Think of Disney's make people happy. In this design thinking process, that's the thing that's going to be our process to find those visions, right? It's useful in product development. It's also useful in process development, using those guardrails of design thinking to find it. And also, we want to do it for different levels, right? It's going to be different when we're doing it for a team as it is for our individual contributors. So some things you might want to do on your own after we say goodbye here is to practice that metaphorical thinking. Practice it with your team. Is there a way you could connect this project to something else? Test it out in lightweight ways, not in high stress, high leverage situations. Try testing them out. Make it a part of your vernacular. Also, try doing this for a couple different members of your team if you happen to have more than one direct report. Use that design thinking process. Really go through. Try another direct report. See what happens when you empathize with them, when you define, ideate, prototype, go all the way through what's going to work for them. As you do this, you're going to continue to get better at it so that you can do it for more people, so that you can do it for teams. Also, make sure you test this out. You're going to get feedback from people, and it's going to be all different, dependent upon the situation and dependent upon where you are coming from and what is appropriate. So make sure you are testing it out. This leads us to the end of our time together today, and I want to invite you to Learn It's Offsite. It's a great community where people are talking about subjects and learning from each other in real time. Please meet me there, meet us all there. And I want to thank you for being here and going through and learning about building a vision for your team. Again, my name is Christian Durso. Thank you for being with me at Learn It. I look forward to seeing you in some of our in-person classes.